Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, previewing the Timberwolves Bucks matchup on Friday night, national TV. We'll take a look at how the two teams match up against one another. It should be a ton of fun. We'll preview the entire game, what you need to know beforehand, all on the show today. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy Timberwolves game day and happy weekend. Hopefully you've had a fantastic week. A big thank you, first of all, for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, Locked On Wolves is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms, as well as the brand new Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. If you've got a Roku, if you've got Amazon Fire TV, download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app. It's more great local sports coverage 24/7. It's absolutely free. All the Locked On Minnesota channels, all the shows, Vikings, Twins, Golden Gophers, Wild. It's all right there. Download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app today on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And of course, you can also follow on Twitter. And the show account is at Locked On T-Wolves. Don't forget the T. And at B Beecken with two B's, two E's, C-K-E-N. All right. So Wolves Bucks on Friday. The Wolves have two full off days here for the first time in the young season. We're just a little more than 2 weeks into the season, and the Wolves should be well rested. However, the Timberwolves injury report that came out on Thursday has both Rudy Gobert and Anthony Edwards listed as questionable. Dane Moore, the Dane Moore NBA podcast, reported that Rudy Gobert did not actually practice. Ant did, according to what he had heard. So, obviously, who knows what happens Friday night, whether those guys will be able to go or not. I will say, though, that Chris Finch said after practice on Thursday that the entire practice was centered around ball movement. And I should also mention, I said this is the first time the Wolves have had consecutive days off since the start of the season 2 weeks ago, Wednesday. So, 2 weeks and 2 days ago. That means it's the first time they've had a true practice in the last 2 weeks, right? Because otherwise during the season, you're not doing like a real practice on your one off day in between games. You're doing a light shoot around the day of a game. They've had a couple back-to-back sets, or I guess just one back-to-back set. So there isn't much opportunity to practice over the course of an NBA season. And when you get the rare consecutive off days to kind of catch your breath, and also leading into a home game too, right? So they were on the road on Tuesday night, and then Wednesday, Thursday off in Minneapolis before you play at home on Friday, and it's the start of a 4-game homestand. So these guys should have plenty of opportunity to get rested up, and it gives Finch the chance to actually run a practice. Now, of course, the first practice they've had since training camp. Remember, Karl-Anthony Towns missed the entire first week of, really all of training camp and the entire first week of anything they were doing team activity-wise. Missed the first, 4 preseason games, 3 preseason games. And now and Rudy Gobert didn't play much in preseason either. He played like half the games because he was coming off the Euro basket performance. And now Rudy misses this practice. And Finch said the practice was all about ball movement, which has been the primary issue for the Wolves so far this season. There's been a few, the Spurs game Sundays, one that comes to mind where the defense was pretty bad. We had stretches in most of the games they've lost where the perimeter defense is awful. But the biggest issue, if we're going to put our finger on exactly one issue, it has to be offensive ball movement. And the numbers bear that out. Like if you just look offense, defense, the Timberwolves are actually the 9th best defense in the league. And they were 6th before they lost on Tuesday to Phoenix, but they're 9th currently in defensive rating. This is coming into play on Thursday, and 23rd in terms of offensive rating. And when you drill down a bit further into the offensive issues, it's ball movement more than anything else. I mean, there's other issues, right? The Wolves aren't shooting enough threes. They're not making enough threes when they shoot them. They're 24th in three-point attempt rate. They're 25th in three-point percentage, 32.6%. That's an issue. The free throw rate, also not to where it needs to be. It's 20th in free throw rate this season, and they're 22nd in free throw percentage. So no matter how you slice it, the offense has struggled, but there's so much talent on the offensive side of the ball for the Wolves that like you can expect those percentages to bounce back, right? Like Towns isn't going to shoot, what is he currently? 35% from three. He's going to finish at 39, 40% from three. Ant's actually shot the ball pretty well. D'Lo's not going to finish at 28% from three. Jalen Noel's not going to finish at 26% from three. Like Bryn Forbes isn't going to finish at 12% for three. These guys are all career, yeah, at least minus D'Lo. D'Lo's like 35%, 36% career. Everybody else is 37, 38 plus percent from three for their career. So you can expect those numbers to bounce back. You can expect Ant and Cat to start drawing more fouls. You can expect Rudy Gobert to draw even more fouls. Remember, his free throw rate's actually down a little bit this year too. Those things will ultimately bounce back. The bigger issue is the stagnant offense, the lack of ball movement, and that's what's led to a lot of these losses here early in the season. And we've talked about it a ton on the show. The ball gets sticky. It becomes a my turn, your turn offense where Cat is running, all the plays are running through Cat, and then Ant's initiating offense, but mostly just looking for his own shot. And then D'Lo goes through these phases. That's not a secret, right? That's been an issue throughout the season so far. And it's the main reason why they're 23rd in offensive rating this season. It's more so that than it is the actual shooting percentages, because the percentages in part reflect the quality of shots that they're getting, and they're not getting a ton of easy shots. They haven't shot open threes all that well either, but they just aren't generating enough easy shots or getting to the free throw line enough. Ant isn't dunking, right? It's been much talked about now on Twitter that Ant hasn't dunked yet this season. He's not getting to the free throw line as often either. So all of those things ultimately need to improve if the Wolves are going to win, especially against a team like Milwaukee on Friday, which is a perfect segue. I want to spend the rest of the show talking about the Bucks. The Bucks are the lone remaining undefeated team in the NBA. So the Wolves absolutely have their work cut out for them on Friday night. And of course, coming off facing one of the other best teams in the NBA, I think actually the only one-loss team in the NBA. Is that true? I'm going to make sure that's true. There's two one-loss teams, Phoenix and Cleveland. Milwaukee remains the only undefeated team in the league, and the Wolves get them on Friday night. So I want to talk about that matchup. Remember, the Timberwolves actually beat Milwaukee both times they played them last year. So I want to talk a little bit about those games, what happened in those games, what did the Wolves do to help them beat the Bucks, and why? Why did the Wolves match up so well against Milwaukee last season? Could we see some more of that Wolves-Bucks magic, Wolves over Bucks, Wolves versus Bucks magic on Friday at Target Center? So I want to do that here next and focus on that matchup the rest of the show. First, though, let's talk about our title sponsor of the show today, and that is our friends over at Prize Picks. On Friday night, I think I will take Karl-Anthony Towns. I take that back. I'll take Giannis Antetokounmpo rebounds over. He's actually averaging, we'll get into the numbers here in a minute, but I believe a career high in defensive rebounds per game. I would take Giannis rebounds over at Prize Picks. I'd maybe take Karl-Anthony Towns over points just because I think he's been playing the ball really well, or scoring the ball really well lately after a slow start to the season. So I think he could be a little undervalued. But by the way, you can actually cross sports with Prize Picks. All you're doing is you're picking over, under, more or less on their various projections. It's not just points, rebounds, assists. You can get into three-pointers made. You can do other sports. So Friday night, there's some college action. You could pick your favorite college game, and you could say so-and-so yarded, over on yards receiving or yards rushing or whatever. Plus, you could take Towns or Giannis in the Wolves game as well. It's really easy. You just pick 2 to 5 players. You can win up to 10 times your money on any entry, and you're not competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. And again, any sport. So, of course, NBA and NFL, as well as college sports, MLB, World Series is ongoing. NHL is well into season. Like I said, college sports. I mean, cricket is on there. Like, you could do basically anything at Prize Picks. You can make your entries in less than 60 seconds. It's really that easy. Just download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. If you're a first-time user, you can get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 if you use our special promo code Locked On. What that means is if you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, they'll give you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up at prizepicks.com for an instant deposit match up to $100. Again, promo code Locked On. All right, let's talk Wolves Bucks matchup, not Wolves Bulls. Wolves Bucks matchup. Let's first start with last season. So, The Timberwolves and Bucks last year played really early in the year. I believe it was like the Wolves' third game. And it was the first game that Chris Finch started Jared Vanderbilt after he played sparingly in the first two games. He decided to go with a more physical power forward in this game against the Bucks. The Wolves starting lineup was D'Lo, Anthony Edwards, Jade McDaniels at the three, which we didn't see much of early, like real early in the season last year, but we saw more as the season progressed. Vando at the four and Karl-Anthony Towns at the five last season. The Bucks were full strength. Brook Lopez was still hurt at the start of last season, but they had Giannis, they had Chris Middleton. They had Pat Connaughton. Of course, this year, by the way, we'll get into the full injury report here in a minute, but Chris Middleton won't play. Pat Connaughton won't play. Giannis is actually listed as day-to-day currently. I think he's likely to play Friday. He hasn't missed any time yet. But at any rate, the Bucks were minus Brook Lopez pretty much at full strength last season. And the Wolves, same. This was far before Jalen Noel was in the rotation. Again, Jared Vanderbilt's kind of first crack at the rotation for Minnesota. And the Wolves went into Milwaukee and won that game by 5. It was a game that they got out to a hot start. We're up 10 after the first quarter, up 8 at halftime. And they built a 15-point lead going to the fourth quarter and were able to hold on at the end. Giannis had a monster game. He had 40 points on 23 shots, 15 of 23 shooting. He actually hit 3 threes in this game, 16 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 blocks, was phenomenal. But nobody else came to the party for Milwaukee. Chris Middleton had 16 points on 16 shots. Grayson Allen had 13 points on 11 shots. Nobody else scored in double figures for the Bucks last year in this first game against the Wolves. The Wolves, on the other hand, had a really well-balanced attack. They had D'Angelo Russell was great, had 29 points. Cat had 25 and 5 assists in this game. Vando was actually the fourth leading scorer with 10 points. Anthony Edwards had 25, but it took him 24 shots to get there. It was just 2 of 10 outside the arc. But the Wolves, they were fantastic on the glass. They were actually a +6 on the glass in this one against Milwaukee, which is obviously surprising given that Milwaukee's has Giannis and can rebound the basketball. Although, at the time they didn't have a whole lot of size with no Lopez. Bobby Portis was coming off the bench for them last year. And, but at the same time, the Wolves remained one of the league's worst defensive rebounding teams. And if I recall correctly, they pretty much put Vando on Giannis early and said like, hey, just be physical and see if we can give him a tough time. That didn't really work. But nobody else could do any damage against the Wolves. And they had some good fortune. Chris Middleton and Pat Connaughton combined to shoot 3 of 17 from 3 last season in this matchup. And again, nobody besides Giannis, Middleton, and Grayson Allen scored more than 10 points in this game, or more than 9 points in this game. And then the second time the Wolves played the Bucks, they beat them again. Now, this time there was no Giannis. So it wasn't, it's whatever, right? I mean, the Bucks are still a good team. And I, at the time I remember saying like, hey, let's not lose sight of that because this is still a team that, won a championship just a couple of years ago. And frankly, the roster hasn't changed much from last year to this year. When the Wolves beat them last year with no Giannis, they still had Drew Holiday. They still had, Brook Lopez was playing at this point, Grayson Allen, Chris Middleton, Portis was in the starting lineup, basically playing instead of Giannis, or played in Giannis's place at the time. And the Wolves beat them easily. They won by 19 points. This was a mid-March game in Minneapolis. Again, no Giannis, but the Wolves played extremely well, and they forced the Bucks into the Bucks actually attempted 52 threes in this game, only got to the line 17 times. And once again, I mean, the Wolves held their own on the glass. They were -7, but there were a ton of rebound or a ton of possessions in this game, right? The final score was 138 to 119. So there were a lot of rebounds to be had, and ultimately that didn't play a big role in this game, although the Bucks hung around for a bit because of the offensive rebounding. It was only a 6-point game after the first quarter, 12 points at halftime, and then the Wolves kind of pulled away in the third quarter. But the Timberwolves, I mean, this was a well-balanced attack from Minnesota. Ant had 25 on 16 points. This is right when he was kind of hitting that March stride he had last year. Karl-Anthony Towns had 25 and 11, and D'Lo was good again with 16 and 9. So 2 games against the Bucks last year, 2 solid games for D'Lo. And part of that has to do with the George Hill matchup. George Hill didn't play as much in the second game last year. So, I mean, there's that. Like, I don't recall if Grayson Allen ever guarded D'Lo a whole lot, but these are, they're players that D'Angelo Russell can beat offensively. George Hill's still coming off the bench this year for the Bucks. And they're starting, obviously Drew Holiday's healthy and starting at point guard, but they also are starting Javon Carter at guard as well. So it's a little bit of a different look Bucks team, but it's all the same guys. The roster is basically the same. I mean, you're talking Giannis, Brook Lopez, Drew Holiday, Grayson Allen are all starters. Javon Carter's been starting as well. That's a change. And then off the bench, you've got Bobby Portis still. You've still got Jordan Nwora, who's a part of the team. Wesley Matthews, same thing. George Hill. So a lot of familiar faces. And the Bucks are now 7-0. They've played 6 of their 7 games at home. So this will only be their second road game so far this season. And their only other road game was the opener against the Sixers. They only beat Philadelphia by 2. They've been at home now for 6 consecutive games, and only one of them was really close. In fact, all but 2 of them were at least double-digit wins. They beat the Hawks by 8, and then they beat the Pistons by 2, and then last time out they beat the Pistons by 24. So, the Bucks have not had tough sledding in terms of their matchups. Again, been at home for 6 of 7, 6 straight. They've only played 2 teams with a winning record. Philadelphia and who else has a winning record? The Hawks do. The Hawks barely have a winning record. And Philly doesn't have a winning record. They're 4-5. So the only team they've played with the winning record is Atlanta, who's 5-3. Other than that, they're playing all below 500 teams so far this season. Obviously, Brooklyn was supposed to be better. The Knicks are 3-4. The Nets are 2-6. The Pistons are 2-7. So the Bucks haven't exactly played the cream of the crop either. In fact, I said this on the show on Thursday, the combined record of Timberwolves opponents this season coming into play, this would have been on Wednesday, was 36-20, which is a pretty good combined record. I didn't add this all up for the Bucks, but they've only played one winning team. So it'd be a lot worse. So say what you will about the Wolves' schedule so far. It's at least been a little more difficult than Milwaukee's. So there is a bit of a chance that Milwaukee runs into hey, we're playing a team that's better than the Pistons, that's better than the Nets as they're currently playing, and the Knicks, etc. And Giannis is a little bit dinged up as well. So I mean, we'll see what happens. He's listed again as questionable for the game or day to day with something minor that was on one of the injury reports. I'm going to see if I can grab it real quick. But Connaughton's obviously been out for a while. Joe Ingles is out until January. They got him from Utah this offseason, but he's not playing for a while. Chris Middleton's been out for a while as well. So this is a winnable game against, weirdly, a team that's undefeated. I just think that it's a bit of a tough spot for Milwaukee based on what they've had to do so far in terms of mostly home games against bad teams. I want to get into some specifics on where the Wolves can do well in this game, what the Bucks have been so great at so far this season, and how that aligns with the areas in which the Wolves have struggled. So we'll do that here next as we close out the show. All right, the Milwaukee Bucks last time out beat the Pistons easily. They beat them by 24, and Giannis was fantastic, 32-12, plus 5 steals, 4 assists, and 2 blocks. They got 26 and 7 rebounds from Drew Holiday. And the rest of the lineup was, nobody scored more than 12 points. They had 3 guys between 10 and 12 points. A pretty well-balanced attack. In general, so far this season, the Bucks have been the league's best defensive team. They're number 1 in defensive rating entering play on Thursday. They're number 13th in offensive rating. And they're right in the middle of the pack in pace. They're 17th in pace. And really, no matter how you slice it, the defense has been fantastic. Opponent effective field goal percentage is only 48.1%. They're top 10 in opponent free throw rate. They're 6th in defensive rebound rate. And all that adds up to just a really poor opponent field goal percentage. They're number 1 in overall opponent field goal percentage. They're number 12 in opponent 3-point percentage, although they're 3rd in 3-point attempts. They're defending the 3-point line well, and defending everything inside the 3-point line extremely well. And of course, a ton of that's Giannis. But Drew Holiday is, of course, a fantastic defender as well. They've got a number of really solid perimeter defenders and some really good team defenders. Grayson Allen, I think, could be a little bit underrated defensively. I think he's a pretty good defender. I mentioned Drew Holiday. Javon Carter's been really good so far this season defensively. That's a huge part of what this team does on the perimeter. So the Wolves ball handlers are going to have to be tight with the basketball, and that's been an issue lately for both Ant and D'Lo. Turnovers have been a major problem for Minnesota. In terms of turnover turnover rate offensively, the Wolves are actually only 17th, which isn't horrible, but they've been much worse lately than they had been early in the season. They're 19th in turnovers per game at just over 15. So still a little bit too high there. And Ant and D'Lo are probably, I would say, the primary culprits there. And they're going to have to be tight with the ball against Drew Holiday and Javon Carter and George Hill and just a host of really solid perimeter defenders from Milwaukee. Of course, Giannis isn't going to make things easy inside the arc or outside the arc for that matter. So same thing with Cat and Rudy. Rudy hasn't been catching the ball as well lately. Hopefully he's healthy and able to play. Cat has been passing the ball really, really well, and turnovers have not been as big of an issue for him as they have in the past. Although it's still there and it's still a problem. I just think that's an area that he has actually improved a little bit. I know his turnover rate's a little higher than Ant, but that's just because he's trying to pass the ball more, right? The assist rate is 7 points higher than Ant's is because Ant's usage rate is so much higher. It's not that much higher than Cat's, but it is higher. He's looking to score the ball more. Cat's been looking to facilitate more than Ant has, frankly. So this is an interesting matchup in that the Wolves have been struggling so much. They're 23rd offensively in terms of rating, and the Bucks are number one defensively. This could be a low-scoring battle. The Bucks' first game of the season was a 90-88 win over Philadelphia. They held the Pistons to 91 points last time out. And especially if Gobert isn't available for the Timberwolves, which is possible, and I guess even more especially if Ant's not available, both were questionable, listed as questionable on Thursday by the Wolves. This could be really tough sledding for Minnesota. In terms of rebounding the basketball, the Bucks are currently 6th in defensive rating and 5th in offensive rating, so they're a fantastic rebounding team. The Wolves are 10th in offensive rebound rate, which they finished, I think, top 10 last year as well, but they're 24th in defensive rebound rate, despite having Rudy Gobert, who's rebounding the ball just pretty much just as well as he has the last few seasons when he was the best rebounder, defensive rebounder in the league last year. But yet the Wolves are still 24th in defensive rebound rate. They really struggled to rebound all five. Their guards have struggled to rebound the ball the last couple of seasons. And I mean, you name the guard, they haven't been a great rebounder for the Wolves. And that goes for Ant too. He's got to rebound the ball better given his size and athletic ability. He's got off to a better start this season. But like Jaden McDaniels, the rebounding is just not there for Jaden. And he's got to contribute more in terms of rebounding the ball if he's going to play the three on this team. His rebound rate is 5% right now. That's barely higher than Bryn Forbes, who's 4.2%. It's below Jordan McLaughlin. It's below D'Angelo Russell. It's below Taurean Prince. And Ant's only 8.4%. So even though it's a little better than we've seen so far in Ant's career, it's got to come up a little bit. So team rebounding the ball, the Bucks aren't really looking to push pace. I mean, like if Giannis gets out in transition, he's going to score anyway. So like, just try and, which is maybe terrible logic, but if the Wolves can just keep the Bucks from getting completely free fast break points and free buckets in transition, the Bucks aren't really looking to push pace, not nearly as much as the Wolves are. They're happy to play in the half court and get Giannis going downhill. He can do that from anywhere at any point in the game. So the Wolves just need to rebound all five. Don't worry about leaking out. Don't worry about, offensive rebounding is what could kill them. Second chance points for Milwaukee, for me, is the biggest concern, minus Milwaukee shutting down the Wolves offense. And who knows? I mean, if Ant doesn't play, maybe the Wolves get into more of a rhythm of actually moving the ball from side to side and generating offense that way. I hope Ant plays, but there could be a silver lining there if he's not able to. Maybe the Wolves can get something going and Ant can kind of see that and be like, okay, I can fit into this. If this, if whatever the Wolves get going actually does work. And remember, the Wolves turn around and play again against Houston on Saturday. So there's always the chance that if Rudy or Ant isn't 100%, they maybe err on the side of caution in a really tough game against Milwaukee to try and have one of those guys come back on 3 days rest prior to Wolves Houston on Saturday, which is obviously a very winnable game. I don't want to focus too much on the Houston game because we got to get through Milwaukee first, but Houston's still just a 1-win team. And I mean, that's a winnable game, obviously, for the Wolves on Saturday. They're 1-8. And while the Wolves will be on a back-to-back, it's at home. There's really there shouldn't be any reason for the Wolves to not win Saturday easily. So if they could steal one Friday, perhaps they can put together a mini streak here before the schedule lightens up just a little bit more again here next week. All right, programming reminder, 45 minutes following the show, or following the game, I should say, on Friday night, following the Final Horn, we're going to go live with Marnie Gellner at Bally Sports North. It is an ESPN game, but I believe there's still a Bally broadcast, so the plan will be to have Marnie on the live postcast. Again, 45 minutes following the game. you can watch that live on the Locked On Minnesota YouTube channel, and I will tweet out that link towards the end of the game on Friday. And then after the fact, we'll post it on the Locked On Wolves feed, not on YouTube, but on all the audio platforms. You'll be able to listen to the live postcast that Marty Gellner and I record, again, roughly 45 minutes following the game after she's done with her post-game duties at Bally. All right, that's all we have for today here on the show. Thanks once again to those of you that do make Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, the show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. That includes the new Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. It's more great local sports coverage 24/7. It's absolutely free. Again, the Locked On Sports Minnesota app, all the Locked On shows, Roku or Amazon Fire TV, you can find it there for free. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. The Locked On Podcast Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Thanks once again for making us your first listen. And a reminder that for your second listen, you can go check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll see you for the live postcast about 45 minutes following Wolves Bucks on Friday night. Thanks again for listening to the show. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.